Welcome to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, where we're on a journey to answer 4 leadership questions from some of the best leaders and leadership minds in America. So today on our episode, we are pleased to have special guest Earnie Bliss. So welcome, Earnie.
Thank you very much. Great to be here, Dave.
Oh, glad to have you. So let's get started. Do you mind introducing yourself to our listeners and give us a little bit about your background, who you are, what do you do?
Okay, so my name is Earnie Bliss. I'm a director of manufacturing in the plastics industry. I've been in plastics for over 20 years. Prior to that, I am retired from the U.S. Navy. I joined the Navy as an enlisted man, later became an officer, and so a lot of my background has a lot to do with my naval experience, because not only am I from the Navy, my dad, his dad, we're all in the Navy too. So I come from a military family. So a lot of that pours out of every pore of my body, right? So along the way, I got degrees in engineering because, of course, you have to, if you want to be an officer, you got to have degrees. And in my career outside of the Navy, they wanted me to pursue an education, and I did. They challenged me to go really far with that. So I ended up getting master's degrees in business strategy, technology management, international business. And that led to living abroad. So putting the military part of it aside, I've lived abroad as part of my career for a total of 12 years, mostly in South America and Europe. And it has been a very, very rewarding part of my life. In summation, though, I'm kind of a renaissance man for American industry. If you remember back in the days of Henry Ford and making Model T cars and the heyday of American manufacturing, where people not only made things, they created things, and they didn't just build, they put their hearts into it. And it's my mission in life to do my small part to revive that part of American industry, to not just be good at making widgets, but creating an industry that drives people, country, and their careers forward.
Nice. I like that. I like how you talk about being a renaissance man for manufacturing, because you hear so many woes about, all the manufacturing's gone and everything's in Mexico and China and we can't get anything built in America. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. It started when I mentored a young man almost 20 years ago, and I wanted to give him a start in life, and I wanted to get him to go to college. And he said, I just don't want to work in a factory. And that word factory kind of stuck with me a little bit. And I said, what do you mean by factory? He said, well, you have this great job, but it's hot, it's dirty, it's unsafe, it's messy. And I just don't want to work like that. It's almost like being in a coal mine. And I brought him to work, and I showed it to him. I said, look, it's clean, neat, well lit. It's air conditioned. It's actually not any of the things that you imagined. And he was so stunned by that revelation that he almost didn't know what to do with himself. And I realized he's not the only one. And we have an entire generation of people, especially young people, who don't understand what it is that we do, why we do it, why it has value in the American economy. And it is difficult. It really is difficult. And that difficulty creates innovation and knowledge that we need to talk about more often, and we just don't, because we are busy talking about other things. And this became kind of my mission in life, of creating a cadre of people who would inspire teamwork and creativity and camaraderie, and finding a way to drive the American economy forward in the use of manufacturing as a tool to get those things accomplished.
Nice. It's funny that you mentioned that, because my dad worked at a cement plant for years. Yep. He was a machinist. And then when computers came around and, okay, well, you don't need to do all the calculations anymore and do all the lathes and stuff, the computer will do it for you. They went to more technicians and not the raw machinists. And so they moved him over to maintenance. But I remember it being relatively similar to what the person you were mentoring described.
Yeah. I look back at old movies, and when they show manufacturing, they constantly show the helicopter view of the stacks of steam, and everybody assumes that that's smoke when it's just steam.
Yeah.
And they constantly show it's dirty and greasy, and people are hot and sweaty and dirty, and they're miserable. And it really isn't like that in the 21st century. That almost does not exist in the United States at all, largely because it's been regulated out of existence. But it just doesn't work because you can't possibly get people in the 21st century to work in that kind of environment. There's far too many easier things to do.
No, but to compare and contrast, I remember, I believe the building was built maybe in the 20s, and it was right
Sure,
there on
yeah,
the Norfolk. And I mean, like I said, it had all the windows, and half of them were broke out up top. And,
sure,
it
sure,
was same thing. Try to get some fans and some air moving into summer. And I
sure.
contrast that with the first time that I had you give me a tour of the facility that you were managing in Winchester. And I was looking
Sure.
around like you said, it's air conditioned, it's clean as a whistle. You could eat off the floor. I was like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah, and I've done tours many times, and that's a common reaction. You see people who say, "I expect it to be all kinds of terrible." Again, I freely admit it is very busy. It is fast paced. It can be loud because you're moving air and machinery, but it is not. It isn't a third world greasy, dirty hellhole. It just isn't that these days, and there are a lot of people who are taking on these roles and finding themselves falling in love with the kinds of things that we do, where they get to work on teams, and they don't just get, and I say this all the time, they aren't just making widgets. We're
Right.
inspiring them to be creative, to solve problems, to do things that are new. And so in that facility in Winchester in particular, we had to solve intractable problems for sustainability because, as you might well imagine, plastics is not exactly seen as in a good light in modern times
Right.
for a few good reasons and for a lot of really bad unscientific reasons. Sustainability is a big deal, and
Right.
so we put together a team in that site in Winchester, and we were able to have them do something so unique and so innovative that 2 patents were granted from the work that they did because they solved a problem that we didn't think we could solve. And so we had 2 inventors coming out of our hourly ranks. Two technicians got their names on patents, and it was the neatest thing ever. You want to talk about hooking somebody for life? They now have a patent on a plaque with their name on it.
Oh
And
man, I love it. I love it.
so, this is the kind of thing that you really can do. Admittedly, it's not common, but you can do if you inspire the creative side of technology at the plant floor level. This is one of the things that we're trying to accomplish as modern leaders.
Nice. Well, I tell you what, that, and I would like to, I want to dig into that. I want to hit our first main question, but I'm hoping
Sure.
you can tag back on when you're talking about inspiring your people, and especially you're right. You don't hear a lot of success stories where you hear frontline hourly wage staff that, like I said, if I mean, that's the epitome of lean process improvement. Okay, I mean, they're the
Yeah.
closest to the problem. They know how to fix it, and to have them be able to actually come up with something that they actually got a patent on as well.
Yeah.
Hopefully, that was well celebrated corporately as well as locally. Yeah.
Extremely well celebrated. I had the corporate public relations team show up and take pictures. When we handed them their patent certificates, they got their picture taken for the entire company website. It was pretty amazing stuff. They were very
And
happy.
that is so cool. That is fantastic. So let's get into our first question here is
Sure.
what does leadership mean to you and what does good leadership look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll go back to a lot of things that my dad always told me. He said
Yeah.
everybody leads. It's just a question of whether or not it's any good or not. So for me, and this might be atypical of what you heard from others. Leadership, if there's a 10 commandments of leadership,
Right.
commandment number 1 is humility, and I really mean that. You've got to find a way to serve others as a leader. And you're a leader when you're thinking and acting on that idea. So humility is rule number 1. And then the second one is articulating a plan. If you and I don't like buzzwords as a rule because everything devolves into 3-letter acronyms and buzzwords. But if you can articulate a plan, if you can tell people that we're going this direction and we're going to get there, even if you're a little off, it doesn't matter. Even if you take a circuitous route to get there, it doesn't matter. What people want to know is that you have a plan and you know where you're taking the organization. They will follow, or they'll be more apt to follow you if you articulate a plan that they understand. And so the third part is articulating a plan they understand requires communication.
Yes.
So a
Amen.
good leader is able to communicate both at the plant floor level and up to the CEO. So, I commonly have to have conversations with hourly employees who are very new. I mean, this week new to the organization, and then turn right around and I have to talk to the executive team of the company about discounted cash flow analysis, right? And so you have to be able to communicate at multiple levels, literally within minutes of each other, and you have to be able to apply equal conviction along all communication streams that you have. If you're able to talk to CEOs and hourly people with the same level of conviction and seriousness, they will listen to you. You obviously, communication is a two-way street. You may
Right.
not get everything you want back, but at least you're talking.
I love it. I love it.
And then rule number 4, integrity, character, and I put in here joy. If you've got to love what you're doing to inspire the love in that in others. I not every day, but most days I wake up and I am thrilled to death that I am alive and able to do these things with the people that I do them with, and I try to act, behave, and carry on in a way that people know that, one, I'm happy, and two, that I have their very best interests in mind, even if I say something that they don't necessarily want to hear. That's the character part of this. Rule number 5 is surmounting challenges and failures. I know you and I have had this conversation, but surmounting challenges is great. You lead a team, you get over the wall or whatever.
Right.
But what do you do when you don't? Right? If you push the envelope enough, sooner or later you're going to fail. And especially in the United States, we don't like to talk about failure. We don't like saying the word failure because everybody sees it as permanent and it's cast in stone. And for me, failure or the lack of achievement of a goal is just pushing on an envelope until you found the border and you just didn't push through. And the United States is a tremendous culture of forgiveness and the ability to take a second, a third, a fourth try at it. And we have one of the things that's made America great, in my opinion, is that people have come back from not pushing the envelope until it broke, and then they did, right? And there's the old adage about Thomas Edison and the light bulb, but I mean, I can tell you about Earnie Bliss and the number of times that I didn't get that thing right in plastics, and how many months I had to try until I got that right. So that's number 5. Number 6 is engaging creativity. We don't talk about this enough in the world.
No.
It's not enough. It's not enough to be an engineer. It's not enough to be an accountant. It's not enough to be really good at commercial. It's not enough to understand the data. You have to find a way to integrate all of these ideas and come up with solutions that are unique enough that allow you to surmount the objective that you have and do something that people didn't expect you to do. And we can talk about this. And I've done this in kind of big ways and small ways. I help these guys get patents, but I also turned around an entire organization across the continent of Europe. And I was able to lead an organization to beat the very best plastics converter in the world more than once, because I was able to do these things. So it's creativity.
Gotcha. What's next?
Understanding. Stephen Covey talked about this 25 years ago, but you cannot do a thing unless you understand a thing. And it's incumbent on leaders to, leaders should not have to do everything that their subordinates do, but they should understand what their subordinates do enough to have an intelligent conversations about positives and negatives. And I
Yeah.
encourage all of my leadership team to make sure that they understand the people below them, and that and as you ratchet down through the organization, everybody has an understanding of everybody else's job. Why? Why do you want to do that? Because everybody wants to go on vacation, Dave. And you can't go on vacation if you don't have anybody backing you up. And this is a way to have people back you up. And then after that, decisiveness. At the end of the day, you got to do something. And this is the way to do something. Number 9 is self-awareness. Every one of us needs to take a step back and understand ourselves and how we're reacting to a situation, and know who you are, who you aren't, and have somebody on your team who will tell you the truth so that they can play devil's advocate for you. Everybody needs a devil's advocate. And
Yes.
finally, you've got to organize all this activity and delegate it and get something accomplished. So those are my 10 commandments of leadership. And I don't talk about this a lot, but this is how I manage people forward.
I love it. I love it. So Ernie's 10 commandments of leadership. Run down that list one more time. Just this, and that.
All right. Number 1, humility, articulation, communication, integrity, surmounting challenges, creativity, understanding, decisiveness, self-awareness, and organization.
Sounds like a book to me.
Yeah,
So with that, we're going to conclude this segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, and we'll talk more about Ernie's potential book, The 10 Commandments of Leadership, when we come back at our next segment. Take care. Welcome back to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, and we are here with special guest Earnie Bliss. We just finished our first segment where Ernie gave us his next best-selling book, Ernie's 10 Commandments of Leadership. But with that, I did want to jump into question number 2 here is, what was one of the biggest leadership challenges that you've had to face?
So, challenges are always hard because they tend to tell negative stories. So I'm going to tell some stories, and we'll talk, have a good laugh, and we'll talk about it. But just to provide a framework from the story, I come from a blue collar background. I am the first person in my family to finish college, and then I went and finished a whole bunch of college, right? And I'm the first person in my family to have conversations with a CEO. And then you mix that with that kind of blue collar, rock steady, firm. You are not going to shake me. I've lived through a lot more stuff than this. You're not going to frighten me. So leadership challenge number 1 is organizational courage. And this is a tough one. This is not just saying yes, sir, and then moving off and then trying to manipulate the process after the fact. This is talking to your boss or his or her boss and being able to say, I respect you. However, I believe that this is the way we should do this. And here are my reasons why. And I firmly believe this. And the data or the information or the facts take me in this direction. And this is what we should do. And sometimes a boss will say, you know what, I'm the boss and this is what we're going to do. And you salute and say, yes, sir, that's great. But I'll give you a really good story. So I can't name names.
Okay, obviously.
But I know a billionaire, which is kind of a cool thing. From a guy from Houma, Louisiana, to say I know a billionaire is a really cool thing. But I know a billionaire. That billionaire owns his own company, and I work for him. He put me over in Europe and asked me to, I won't put it the way he put it, but he wanted me to plan and organize Europe because he couldn't understand why it was faltering so badly. So I'd been abroad many times in my military career. I spoke a couple different languages, and I was considered to be a pretty good fit. And I was thrilled with the opportunity, couldn't wait to do it. Along the way, we had some successes. And once we had successes, people wanted to get involved. When we weren't having successes, no one wanted to touch us with a 10-foot pole. But once we started having successes, people wanted to get involved and tell us how to be more successful. So I was standing in Romania, in a manufacturing plant that we carved out of a field of cows. I'm not exaggerating. And there were cows running around outside the fence of our property. I was talking to the plant manager and the staff. I don't speak Romanian, but they speak a little bit of English, and we kind of muddled our way through it.
Right.
And we were talking about how to do all of the things that we talked about in the first segment, and get those things going, because Romania is kind of it's in U.S. terms, that would be kind of like the rednecks or the uneducated people, and that's how Europe treats most of Eastern Europe. And yet they are hardworking, they're good people, they're not as well trained, and they cannot wait to find a pathway to success. And for an American to walk in and teach them how to be successful was like bars of gold to them. They listened to every word I said, so I was constantly aware that I couldn't make any mistakes, and I was always trying to make sure I told them the right things. So I'm trying to help this plant in Romania grow, and we can talk about that. Ultimately, we tripled the size of the plant, and we can get to that. But I got a phone call from the CEO, who was a billionaire, and he's a great guy. And he called me up and he said, "Ernie, I'll tell you what we're going to do." I'm like, "Oh God, what are we going to do?" And he wanted to put a machine from the United States into Romania.
Okay.
And it was a specific machine that would not work in a European scale because it made too much stuff per day. It made more stuff in a day than the Romanians could use in a month. You could
Oh,
make
wow.
you could give something to every Romanian in about 1 month, and then the machine would shut off. And that even assumes that you had those sales. And it was just too big. It was
Yeah.
too American for the Eastern European mindset. And I said, "Well, sir, that is probably not going to be advantageous to us, because for all these reasons." And he
Right.
said, "Well, I've been running this company, and it's my company." And I said, "Sir, I understand it's your company, and I will do what you tell me if you order me to do it. But in good conscience, I cannot let you make this mistake. This would take your money, and you'll never make another dollar off this move if you do it." He said, "Well, we'll talk about this in Italy tomorrow. I'm getting on a plane right now." So he got, and without exaggeration, he stopped what he was doing and he got on a flight to Italy, which is where our company headquarters were. And I knew that was my cue to get on a plane and fly from Romania to Italy. And so I met him the next morning at our corporate offices in Italy. Marble floors, marble walls, glass office, beautiful place, right? And I'm standing there in a suit, and it's 7:30 in the morning, and he walked in. He landed at the airport, drove immediately, had a driver drive him to the offices, didn't sleep all night, overnight from the flight. And he walked in and met him in the center of this marble floor. And all of the Europeans came to see him, and they said, "Oh, we can't wait to talk to the CEO." And unfortunately, he didn't show up in a gracious tone of voice. He said, "Wow, we're going to talk about," and all of the Europeans, their eyes got this big, and they went whoop, and they were gone.
Like the Red Sea.
And I said, "I know you want to talk. How can I help you?" And he said, "Well, we're going to do this thing." And I said, "Sir, I'll do it if you make me, but you put me here to make good decisions for Europe. You're giving me an American solution, not a European solution. And it's my job to tell you that is the fact. And I have lots of commercial data that suggests that this is a terrible mistake. And if you do this, you will lose a lot of money. It's your money, but I don't want to see you lose your money, and it ties up resources. It ties up real estate for things that we have planned for Eastern Europe, and you will tie them up until we eventually have to pull the machine right back out of Romania and do something with it, because that is what's going to happen." And you could see him agitate in place. And I'm conscious of the idea. I'm standing in his building, and I'm being paid by him, and he's a billionaire. He built this business, and I'm telling him that he's wrong. He said, "Well, I've been doing this for 50 years." I said, I know you have. You put me in Europe to do this the European way, not the American way. And in this one thing, you're making a tragic mistake. And I am confident that the path I'm already on will lead you to the kinds of success that you want without having to make this mistake. And he looked at me and said, you better be right. And he stormed off. So this is organizational courage. He could have sent me packing like that because it would have been that easy. I'm not suggesting that anybody needs that much organizational courage, but at some point you've got to be able to tell your boss the truth.
Ladies and gentlemen, do not try this at home. You have been warned.
You've got to be able to tell your boss the truth. You have to do it with professionalism and confidence. And if the boss says, well, it's on me now, this is what we're going to do, then that's it. If he would have ordered me to move that machine into Romania, I would have done it. And I will tell you that when I turned the European organization over to my successor, he ordered my successor to do it. My successor didn't talk to him. My successor put the machine in Romania, and it has sat there since 2018. And they turned it on once to make sure it would power up, and that's it. It has not moved since 2018. So,
oh my goodness. Well, I had a follow-up question. You mentioned organizational courage, and like I said, at least you got the disclaimer. You know, boys and girls, do not try this at home. We cannot guarantee your job continuance if you do that. But speaking about that, I mean, you have the conviction, you have the data. It's not like you're going in there half-cocked.
If you don't have proof of your convictions, then you don't really have convictions. You just have an opinion. You have to have data, information. You have to have testimonials. You have to have something that to stand on, because any good leader in the organization, again, we're all smart, but so are all these people that we're talking to. Everybody's smart, and they're going to challenge your challenge. And if you don't have better information or enough information to convince them, well, they're the boss, and they're the boss for a reason. They're the boss because they take bigger risks than you do until you're the boss. And so you have to be willing. You have to be willing to serve the needs of the organization, even if your personal convictions suggest that you should do something else.
Gotcha. No, one follow-up I'd like to have you kind of touch on is you were talking about organizational courage. You're talking about being able to talk to your boss's boss, your boss's boss's boss. Talk a little bit about the importance of an organization. Maybe this is from the CEO level. Maybe talk about it from a different level. But an organization creating a culture where I'm with you. I hate the buzzwords, but it's applicable and it cuts the paragraph. They built a culture of enough psychological safety to know that I can bring these ideas, I can make the well-founded challenges, I can do this and not have to worry about getting canned the minute I disagree and I stop being a yes man.
So yeah, this is incumbent on all organizations. I'm responsible for about $500 million worth of business and about 500 people, and I've made it really clear because I've taken the step of saying it out loud. If I'm making a mistake, I'm telling you to tell me, because you cannot allow my ego to hurt the organization. You've got to tell me that I'm making a mistake and tell me why I'm making a mistake. One, because I want to learn, because I assume if you have better information than I do, I need to learn something. But more importantly, business is competition. And there are other people and other companies who woke up today looking for a way to beat you. And if you're driving your decision-making process on the basis of your ego and not good business information, you're ultimately going to hurt the organization. And that's going to have negative consequences for you, for your people, for your organization. And it shouldn't be allowed. A lot of companies talk in their top line in their HR departments about that they want to be free and open. It's yet another step to say, please, I'm telling you, I'm if you will, I'm ordering you. Tell me if I'm hurting the organization. I need to know that, because sometimes you need to hear that, and sometimes, most of the time, you hear that politely and with really good information. Sometimes we have town halls and we'll hear from hourly employees, and you hear it in a different way, in a different tone, and you say, well, all right, I had not heard that before. And you at least investigate, right? You've got to be, and as a leader, you have to be willing to hear people say that you're all screwed up and you need to get better, because sometimes you are. None of us are infallible, and there's lots of ways to be smart, and you have to respect the idea that you're not always the smartest person in the room, right?
Absolutely. And one thing that I picked up from what you said earlier, and I wanted to kind of connect it to this, was that you talked about being able to have conversations on the level for anywhere from frontline staff all the way to CEO and everywhere in between, and
Sure.
had to be able to break down complex topics into multiple different levels. And like I said, it's a two-way conversation. Sometimes it doesn't come across the same on the other, but at least you got the information across in a digestible format that they can understand at either end of the spectrum. Briefly talk to some of the listeners out there about you do exactly what you said. Okay, I'm ordering you. I'm telling you, if I'm screwing up, let me know. And then have to have the realization that not everybody has developed the same level of communication skills that you have. Because sometimes the information is good, but the way it might come across is really bad, maybe even come across as disrespectful. Maybe they mean it, maybe they don't. But talk a little bit about having to kind of process that and realize that, like you said, if you're having town halls, people are ticked off, they're saying X, Y, and Z. The info might be legit. It's just how it was delivered sometimes can really, obviously, bruise the ego, but make it where it's not as palatable.
Yeah. So one of the things about accomplishments is that they make you feel accomplished, and you can, like anything else, that can be taken too far without introspection. This is why I talk about a good leader has self-awareness. You have to be aware of the fact that you don't know everything. And it's easy to understand that you shouldn't know every nut, bolt, and screw, but you have to be self-aware enough to say, I don't know every nut, bolt, and screw, and there might be a nut, bolt, or screw that is really important that I know nothing about, that person knows everything about. There's been plenty of times in my career where somebody said that, that's a great plan, sir. And I really enjoy your plan, sir. But you may have not figure out how to apply electricity to that machine. And sir, without electricity, it won't come on. So you might want to figure that one out. And so something as trivially simple as that, you've got to be able to hear. And because I talk to frontline people, they will say it in pretty salty language sometimes. Yeah. And I've had to tell people more than once, I don't care how you relate it to me. I can take it. Again, military background, blue collar family. I can take it. The real problem for the organization is if I don't hear it. So if you've got to drop salty language to get me to listen to you, that's my problem. And I need to examine why it takes that much for me to listen to you. That's my fault, right? But you got to tell me. And if I get offended, my feelings are my responsibility. If I get offended by the fact that I failed to give you an avenue to talk to me openly, that's again my fault, right? So I need to examine my own leadership abilities and understand that I need to get better. But it starts with listening to the people who are giving me the information, who are trying to help the organization. And again, communication is a two-way street. This is not a monologue. This is it goes both ways, and I have to be able to listen to it as much as I want people to listen to me.
Nice. Well, like I said, I think that a lot of people don't take it as well as you have, and I would personally recommend that leaders, like I said, to get to the point, like build up that a little bit of that thick skin, because sometimes the right answer is not going to come across. And you were talking about the salty frontline worker. I remember years ago when I was in the fire department, you always had, and we'll wrap up with the segment with this, and then we'll get on to our last two questions. But I remember first started, I'm excited, I'm in there, I'm doing, and you did, the old crusty master firefighter at the table with the cup of coffee and, the cover shirt that looks like it's half worn out and just griping, moaning, all the time, just, constantly bad attitude. And you didn't even want to necessarily be around him.
Right.
Whatever. So it is what it is. Well, I don't know why I should have done this a long time before, but I finally got a gumption. I poured a cup of coffee, sat in front of the guy, was sitting there reading the newspaper, and I'm like, hey, man, tell me about your career. Tell me about what's going on, man. I really don't know you, right? And I just sat back and listened. And it hit me like a shovel upside the head.
Yep.
I sat there and I got a whole new revelation because there's one thing I realized when I heard that conversation. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
If the same thing had happened to me that happened to him through his career, how many times skip for promotion, how many times this happened to that happened, all these different things happened to him. You know
Yep.
what? I'd probably be just as pissed off as he is.
Yep.
And
That's exactly right.
and the stuff they were saying, it had merit. It just was coming across in a different package. And then I realized, okay, these guys do have great ideas. These guys are, okay, they know what they're doing. And then one thing I will laugh about, and I'll give you a really quick funny before we end the segment, and then we'll get to our next two questions. I remember we went 8 years without a raise. And I remember one old master firefighter is like, I get me a raise every year. And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? We haven't had a raise in 8 years. I said, you don't understand. I get me a raise every year. And I'm like, all right, John, I don't get what. What are you talking about? He said, well, what's a raise? I'm like, make more money? He said, two things are a raise. He said either make more money for doing the same work or make the same money for doing just a little bit less work. He got his 3% every year regardless. And I think leaders will remember that. There's a lot of frontline staff, like I said, that
you learn a lot when you talk to frontline people. You learn a whole
Exactly. All right. So we will wrap up this segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, but we will be back shortly for our last two questions. Take care.
All right.
Welcome back to our final segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, here with special guest Earnie Bliss. And we're going to dive straight into one of our last two questions. So, Earnie, what do you see as one of the biggest mistakes leaders make today?
So when I see people in modern times leading, and this is going to sound like pejorative, but contentment. So people become happy with their success and they stop pushing. So I tell people all the time that I don't need things in my office. I don't need plaques on the wall. I don't need to talk about. I don't need to talk about the wins or the losses I've had in the past. I'm here to talk about what are we going to do today to build a better tomorrow. One of the things that everybody does sooner or later is they plateau. Everybody does. If you're successful at all, you plateau. And if you plateau, you have to be, again, self-awareness. You have to understand I'm on a plateau. And a good leader inspires a change, a step change, so that you stop plateauing and you do something different. And so if we go back to my Romanian story, right? The reason I tell this story about Romania is because the next thing that came up is that we had eventually plateaued in Europe and things were going well, and they were going well but not great, and we were still and also ran commercially against one of the best companies in the world at what I do. And they were so good, this company is so good, that when they bid on a project, other companies simply stop the bidding process because they know they're going to lose. And
don't need to waste time.
And the Europeans just said, Ernest, and of course they called me Ernest, you don't understand. You can't beat them. And I said, well, you don't understand. I'm an American. I always assume I'm going to win, rightfully or not. I'm going to figure it out. So we were able to take a kind of a pan-European look at our business.
Okay.
And we were able to find a way to, pick out your buzzwords, value stream mapping and lean manufacturing and SMED and continuous improvement and total system management, all that stuff. And we were able to articulate a plan to have all of our European groups work together in order to win this package of business for Eastern Europe. And we did this thing that was considered to be impossible. Our customer had an operation where they changed over their VATs in 45 minutes. And they said, well, if you could change over your plastics systems in 45 minutes, you would get this business because this would be a synchronicity. And they had this project called Synchronicity. And if you could achieve synchronicity, you'd get all of our business. Well, yes, and I said, in Romania, it takes 5 days to change over. And they said, well, then you can't achieve synchronicity. And so they said, of course, they laughed and said, nobody can do that. And I realized that was my opportunity. If I could figure out
the gauntlet in Ernie's face, bam, take that.
I'm going to find a way to do this. So everyone Everyone thought that this was crazy. And it took 3 years, but 3 years later, we had gotten our process down to 45 minutes. Tremendous amount of creativity and engineering and commercialism and working with people in different languages, different cultures,
Yeah.
agreeing to get along, even though there are cultures in Europe that don't naturally get along, agreeing to work together. We
Mm.
achieved synchronicity, and that site in Europe is now 3 times its former size. We've acquired that. They acquired the entire Eastern European sphere of business for that customer. And the best company in the world was beaten so thoroughly that they packed up their plant, closed it, and they moved out of Eastern Europe.
Holy smokes. That's awesome.
So this is what you can do if you can put all of this together. And it starts with understanding when you've plateaued, and are you content, or and you're never going to achieve more, or are you
Right.
simply stalled for the time being and you need to reset your organization. So that's number one. One of the other big mistakes is demanding more, which is what I did, without
Right.
empathy. I knew that I was asking people to do things that are really hard. So I had to get them through the process of intellectually understanding what they felt to be impossible and
Right.
put it in the framework of possible, and understanding in my own mind that they weren't possibly trained well enough to imagine that this could be done, because I was having a hard time imagining how to do it. How could I expect them to do that, right? So one of the things I like to do is milestoning. So I said, all right, look, this process takes 5 days. Let's get it to 4 days. Okay, you got 4 days. Let's get it to 3 days. You got it to 3 days. And suddenly people start to believe. And then
Gotcha.
3 days went to one day, and one day went to 12 hours, and 12 hours went to 2 hours. And suddenly you start understanding, and everybody starts believing. The other mistake that people make is they've seen too many movies, and they believe that they need to demonstrate that they're the boss by being a boss rather than a leader.
Mm.
And again, we all do it, and you have to, again, self-awareness. You have to be aware of when you're being the boss and when you're being a leader. If you're telling people to do things because you're telling them to do them, you're speaking from the wrong leadership framework. You need to articulate things to people in a way that they understand why, the big why. Everybody needs to understand the big why.
Yeah.
If you're telling people to do things because you're the boss, you've already lost them, and frankly, you've lost yourself. You need to step back and realize what kind of leader you've been.
I'd agree with that 100%. I remember back again, I hadn't been in the fire department that long, and I remember being at a very big station. Like I said, three companies that were there. So a lot of older guys that were there, been there for ages. They jokingly called it the retirement station. But I remember a relatively new captain coming in saying, "Do X, right? Whatever." He said, "Whatever," because I'm the captain. And then okay, and then you guys start getting them. I said, "No, no, no, I do this." So and they were like, because I'm the blank blank captain, right? And he just kept on, and he probably about 8 times, man, in the course of a couple of years, because I'm the blankety blank captain. And so one of the old salty master firefighters got up. He's like, "We all know you're the captain. Who are you trying to convince?" And he was trying to convince
If you have to
himself.
tell everybody what your title is, you've already lost.
Exactly. He was trying to. He said, "Or you believe you're the captain, right? I mean, do you? Like, we all know it. We're going to do it. We're not going to be as fast as you want, but guess what? I mean, who are you trying to convince?" And he was trying to convince himself, but because he didn't have that confidence to be a leader, he was, to your term, more being a boss.
Absolutely a lack of confidence. He's speaking from a lack of confidence. It's very, very common, especially with newer leaders and especially with older leaders, because they get that we're going to do this because I've been doing this for a long time.
Right.
And like, well, okay, but maybe there's a better way.
Yeah.
So last couple on my list, lack of collaboration. One of the things, leaders, because they're leaders, are accomplished people. They've accomplished something most of the time. And when you lead something, when you have a department or a plant or a division or a company or a ship or whatever, you want to be able to run your thing, and you forget that you got there because other people helped you. in ways that you may not articulate well or understand well. No one gets there alone. And you have to constantly be aware that you need to engage other people to help you. And the more accomplished you are, the more you have to be self-aware enough to remember that other people got you there, and you need to engage those people to help you move on even further. Collaboration is key, and you have to be willing to assume that you don't know everything and swallow your ego and then be able to move on. Last one, we got to talk about fear, Dave. Americans hate talking about negative topics. So you got to talk about failure. So we got to talk about fear. Everybody has fear. I can tell you that I have experienced tremendous levels of fear. And the only way to function is not to make it go away. You have to learn how to live with it. And so if you're going to lead an organization, you are volunteering to set yourself out on the edge of a cliff with a group of people behind you and believe that no one's going to push. And, and so there's fear of failure. There's fear of success. There are people who are afraid of what's going to happen if this actually goes. What happens if suddenly we triple the size of the business, or we make a whole lot of money, or we go on the Dr. Dave show, or fear of the unknown. This is one of the big ones. Fear of the unknown. People look into the darkness and they imagine the boogeyman out there, when in fact it's nothing but air. And I've seen this cripple people. You have to train yourself and constantly look at new ways of understanding how you lead, so that you can understand the unknown is only the darkness, and there's not a boogeyman out there.
Gotcha. No, I as I say, that's when you were talking about collaboration being a big one, and I truly feel like, because you talked about this in another segment, I truly believe if you don't develop good communication skills and good active listening skills, that you will, and try to meet people where they are, you'll never be able to collaborate effectively if you cannot communicate effectively.
Yeah. You have to find a way to speak to people in the way that they're used to hearing it, not in the way that you're used to saying it.
Well, we call that platinum rule communication. A lot of the workshops I do, it's like the golden rule is great for everything on earth except for communication. Because if you're the 3 bullet point kind of high D guy, you go around vomiting 3 bullet points on people, and it's just not going to be good. You get the administrative secretary, hey, I need this, and this, and run out the door, and all of a sudden she's crying, he bullied me, and then it's an HR complaint. It's what, and I was sharing that story with the CEO one time, and she turned around and she eyes got big as saucers. She's like, how did you know? And I'm like, crap, no, what? And she said, we have an HR complaint in our Hampton Roads office over that exact same, like literally exact scenario. I'm like, I didn't know. It's just people are people, and that's something that's very common.
Yep.
But
that's
platinum rule communication is communicating with them how they would like to be communicated with.
Right.
Giving a crap, reading signs, caring about the person, like you said, being empathetic, being able to kind of, get an idea of their pace and tone, and, trying to, communicate on that level.
Yep. That's exactly right.
So,
so one of the other things I got to mention that I got to talk about one fear that any good leader is going to understand at some point. If we're going to talk about improving leadership skills, if we improve the people around us, which is one of the things that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
You're going to train somebody, and there's going to be a fear in your mind that they're going to take your spot. And so when we talk about the next question, one of the things you got to do is make sure that you have your next spot mapped out, and you cannot be worried about the people who come up behind you. It is very literally your job to prepare your organization to live when you're, if you have a sick day, if you have a vacation day, if you get promoted and move on, the organization must continue in your absence.
Yep.
What that naturally creates is the fear that the people that you've trained can replace you too. And let's not be naive. That does happen, but it's exceedingly rare. If you're able to develop an organization that well, most companies would live for those kinds of people. And if you're one of those people, they will find a spot for you.
And the worst case scenario is when you don't do that out of fear. And then all of a sudden it's all about you and you're the director. And all of a sudden there's a VP spot open, but they don't give it to you, even if you're most qualified, because you don't have anybody trained to take your spot, and your spot is crucial.
Yep.
So being that you had mentioned it, let's throw out the last question. What do you think is the best way for leaders to improve their leadership skills?
So my view of leadership is that it's a continuous circle, that there is no goal in leadership. It's a continuous function of finding a way to get better all the time. As Stephen Covey said, you got to sharpen the saw, right? So a lot of this can fit neatly under the idea of sharpening the saw. But in my view, you've got to constantly update and challenge the things you think you know and the assumptions that you have by working with other people. You can't be afraid of being around other leaders. Again, we're all smart people. Other leaders are smart people. Rather than box yourself into an office or a department or whatever and be awesome at this, engage with a group, and you would be surprised, shocked at how much they're willing to articulate to you to make you better, or just by casual observation, how much you can learn just by watching other people lead in ways that maybe aren't better, but are just different from what you learn. So when I talk about groups of leaders, I'm not even imagining that you've got to spend millions of dollars on memberships. I'm talking about, Rotary International. You and I are both members of Rotary International, civic organizations, school sports, right? You want to talk about some very, very baseline leadership. Teach a 5-year-old how to play t-ball, right? Scouting, get involved and learn from other leaders about how they lead, and that will make you a better leader. This is a little bit tough for people to understand. There's a rule in the Navy that says no change of the ordinary day of the watch shall be made until 2 bells. So that's an idea of saying observe, watch, listen before you change any rules. When I've had to move into a new organization many times, and I've used this rule to my advantage. One of the things that good leaders will do is go into an organization. Don't give a big speech. Don't tell everybody what your title is. They know that. They already know. Don't make a big speech about what you intend to do. No one's going to remember that. But what you can do is tell them your name, tell them you're proud to be there, tell them, hey, let's grab lunch, and then just sit back and observe how the organization functions. You will get more out of that than any number of speeches that no one will remember. I normally, when I take over an organization, I ask permission. I say, how many days are you going to give me where I can just watch so that I understand, rather than go in guns blazing and start telling people how to do their jobs and potentially make things worse instead of better, which is a cardinal sin of leadership.
Which I think most of the time you're 100% correct. It does make things worse. It never makes things better. Call it, management by observation, call it, hey, I'm a big fan of Ono circles, whatever. But the bottom line is, like I said, you go in and, hey, I'm here, I'm the new boss, and we're going to do blah, blah, blah. We're not even listening to them. Makes it, that's a little on the tough side to get them to buy into your why when you haven't even, said that, hey, I'm here. That they know that you're empathetic and actually care about them, that you can articulate where you want to go with them. Just back to the Ernie's 10 Commandments of his new best-selling book, right? That's I'm
going to write that down. They're going to buy into your why. I'm totally writing that down. But I will tell you that I'll go back to what I said earlier about having a devil's advocate.
Yeah.
In your organization, as you're observing, look for someone who's willing to be the devil's advocate. And there's always somebody. But somebody who's willing to tell you what they think is the truth. It may not be where the organization is going. It may not be what you want to do, but you're going to get the inside skinny from those people. And you need to have that. You need to know how the place really runs, not how you think it runs.
Well, like we said during the break, is CEO or leader, and we'll wrap up with this: developing lines of communication. Not trying to bust up the chain of command or anything, but somehow you've got to figure out how to develop lines of communication with frontline staff and frontline supervisors to get the real skinny on what's going on.
Right.
I jokingly say the best filtration system in the world isn't reverse osmosis or activated charcoal; it's middle management. And so,
Right.
without having those back channel conversations that you can actually get, or just like what was it, the Caesar, the emperor that had somebody to just a
Yep.
slave in that you're only human, you're only human, you're only human.
Yep.
Same thing. So with that, tell our listeners how they can get connected with you, your company, get with you on LinkedIn, all the goodness of Earnie Bliss.
So the simplest thing to do is connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm out there on LinkedIn, and I have these conversations with different groups all the time. I'm in Rotary International, and I'm in civic organizations. So connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can continue this conversation.
That sounds great. Thanks so much, Earnie, and we will see you next time on Conversation with Leadership with Dr. Dave. Take care.
Thanks, Dave.